Let's go back to Victoria now. I want to get into Jacinta Allan's Smoke and Mirrors Act today on youth crime. We'll get into that, but there's another bill that's going to upset a great many Victorians, and so few understand what's on the way. Let me explain it. This is a planning amendment bill. It's currently before the Parliament. Very little attention in the media, but a lot of criticism already from industry and community groups. They warn if this bill passes the Parliament, it's going to centralise planning. This is residential planning rules in the hands of the minister, and it will take away power from your local council. It will take away the ability of the Parliament to oversight these laws, and it will basically stop objections from residents in a street or a community about some big development being foisted on them. Here to discuss this now, Liberal member for Polwarth, Richard Reardon. Richard, thank you. I mean, I'd heard the speculation, but you drew the detail of this bill to my attention. What are the most concerning aspects for you?
Well, the concerning aspects are many and varied, and as such, the Liberal Party will not be supporting this legislation because it's going to make a mockery of Melbourne and Victoria generally. Just to give you a quick highlight, the Parliament can no longer have any say over what the Minister decides. Neighbours will no longer be notified of quite large developments next door to them, so that fear that people have of waking up next door with a 3 or 4 story apartment building with windows leering in through your bedrooms and bathrooms, there's nothing you can do about it. Traditional owner groups have to be notified in many, many instances where your next door neighbour doesn't. And on top of all of that, the big tax theft, and this Victorian government is becoming the masters of tax theft, Peter. Your program's covered extensively the fire service tax, but now the GAIC and development fund. So add in all those growth suburbs where millions and millions are taxed on the development to, in theory, build the traffic intersections and add the facilities and infrastructure in those new communities. They are now planning to legalise the theft of that money from those communities to spend on whatever the government says is a benefit to those communities. So in the case of Victoria, the whole nation knows about the railway tunnel from nowhere to nowhere. Just read that as if the government says your community will benefit from this train tunnel, they're going to take that money that's supposed to be the highway interchange at your suburb or the traffic lights or the new roundabout or the swimming pool. That money's all being funneled off to pay for Jacinta Allan's great extravagances.
I think people would be shocked to know that the local Aboriginal mob is going to know about the 3-story building going next to your block of land or your home, but you're not. They'll potentially have an opportunity under the new treaty laws in Victoria to oppose that. You won't. Given the Greens say they're all about the environment, given you've got a whole motley crew of people in the upper house in Victoria, is there any chance they are going to oppose some of this legislation?
Well, it creates strange bedfellows sometimes. I mean, this assault on the way we live in Victoria and our suburbs and our country towns, this is everywhere. It's not just Melbourne. This will actually unite people, Peter. I mean, people out in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, mid-ring suburbs that have treed areas, take Blackburn, for example. I was out there recently. That community is incredibly protective of its tree canopy and tree covers. You know, that's all up for grabs under this new planning regime. Out in my own country regions, out in regional Victoria, there are huge areas around most of our country towns in Western Victoria, for example, that have all these traditional owner overlays. They're all now going to have to get permits and permission from traditional owner groups to go for a garden shed in the backyard, a new front fence, all these permits. It's also, ironically, it's just going to make getting a permit and progressing any development in Victoria so much longer, because the traditional owner groups, they don't have yet the funding to manage dealing with every planning permit that comes by. It's just crazy stuff. It's putting politics, cheap left-wing politics, ahead of affordable housing, growing communities, sustainable towns and suburbs, all being thrown out the window in order to take money from developments to pay for tunnels and to make cheap political points around traditional owners and treaty, and it's a real disappointment, and every Victorian needs to be aware of it. Every Victorian needs to know this is just another nail in the Victorian coffin.
Well, I think you've got to get this message out. I'm glad you're here tonight to talk about it because, as I said, I think it's devastating when you get into the detail, but honestly, it's not being ventilated enough in the community yet. What was also out today from the Premier, these youth justice reforms, and I use parentheses there because she talked a big game on the front page of the papers today, but when pushed about it in the press conference, there's absolutely no legislation. It has not even been drafted yet. This was an announcement to me that looks like a reaction to bad polling. Labor must be bleeding on youth violent crime at the moment. That's what's got her out there today. And I tell you what, I mean, Brad Batten sometimes I think's a bit too nice, needs to take the gloves off. But today he didn't miss. Have a listen.
This is the absolute highlight of the absolute this government feeds the community. I'm sorry, you can't come out with a media release and not have the legislation written to protect Victorians. That is an absolute joke. This is the time that we have to say to Jacinta Allan, enough is enough. Every single victim I've spoken to, I tried to stay calm at the start, every single victim I've spoken to will be absolutely and utterly offended.
And of course, this comes, Richard, after the promise she says that she's going to have protesters unmasked, and all she's going to do now is legislate that the police have the right to politely ask them to take the mask off, but only if they think they've either committed a crime or about to commit a crime. Otherwise, they're masked up, there is no change. So she's all hat, no cowboy. You know, this is just big smoke with announcements and hoping that's enough to turn people back into voting for her at the next election.
Yeah, look, Peter, it's stuff you couldn't write a script for. I mean, clearly, Jacinta Allan and her cabinet received some pretty bad polling over the weekend. They had a meeting late last night and decided to come up with a Queensland government very, very light policy. Like, to give you an idea, Queensland's adult crime, adult time policy has 33 more offences. We have just 8 offences, and only if the person who's committed one of those 8 offences, which mind you doesn't include stealing cars and a whole raft of other pretty serious crimes, they're only going to suffer a little bit more at the hands of the justice system if they're a repeat offender. So, you know, all the kids out there that want to still steal a car, go and steal your first car because you'll get a free pizza voucher and some video games in the lockup for the night. You'll be back out and home before breakfast the next day. That's the first issue.
Yeah, Richard.
And as for the weak move-on laws, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And I was just going to make the point, of course, it's all dependent. None of this is mandatory sentencing. So it's all dependent on the weak judges in Victoria and the magistrates in Victoria actually levelling these penalties, because they're in the legislation now and they're being bailed anyway at the whim of the magistrates. So unless we start electing our judges, like America does, and I've got an open mind on that, unless we start electing and removing them if they don't do what the community wants, this is just smoke and mirrors. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Richard. We'll follow up that legislation on planning laws.